Today, I'd like to talk with you about a rather special book, Sad Guys. It's a book that speaks about sex, yet it's not merely about sex. It tells the stories of those who have been ignored, misunderstood, or even labeled as abnormal. And these people are, in fact, among us, perhaps your friends, your partners, or even yourself. The term "side" has only gradually become more widely known within gay culture in recent years. Yet behind this single word lies an entire group that has long been overlooked. Those who do not enjoy anal intercourse and do not wish to engage in it. They still experience desire, they still kiss, embrace, and enjoy intimacy. But their sexual expression differs from what mainstream notions define as sex. Such a difference often renders them marginal figures within gay culture. The author of this book, Joe Kort, is both a psychotherapist and a gay man himself. He is, in his own words, a side. In the book, he reflects on his personal experiences and brings together numerous stories from side guys around the world. Through their voices, we are able to glimpse another form of a sexual expression, one without penetration, without assigned roles, yet filled with a genuine sensation, connection, and emotion. It sounds simple, does it not? But imagine when an entire culture is obsessed with asking who is the top and who is the bottom, how much courage it must take to say, "I am neither." When I first read Sad Guys, I was genuinely astonished, because I suddenly realized that this book wasn't merely about sex. It was about bodily autonomy, the diversity of desire, and the loneliness of being misunderstood. Joe Kort's tone is plain, yet profoundly sincere. Through it, I saw a group of people who had never been illuminated by mainstream sex education. They are neither rebellious nor self-pitying. They simply wish to live honestly as themselves. You may ask, why does this matter? Is sexual preference not merely a personal choice? Yes, sex is indeed personal, but shame is social. When a particular form of desire is deemed not real enough, not manly enough, or not sexual enough, that shame follows a person like a shadow, making them question whether they are broken, whether they are incomplete. This is why Sad Guys is such an important book, because it gives these voices a place to exist. It says you do not need to have anal intercourse to be a complete gay man. It allows those who once thought of themselves as strange to feel, perhaps for the first time, that they belong. In this episode, I shall take you through this book. I shall begin by introducing what side is, where the term originated, and why it has quietly sparked a small revolution within gay culture. Afterwards, I shall explore several passages from the book, words that contain authentic experiences, profound psychological struggles, and moments of rediscovering one's own identity. Finally, I shall share my personal reflections and what I wish to say to you, because I truly believe that every person deserves to be understood, to be touched, and to be loved wholly and completely.欢迎来到云游记 Welcome to Journey of the Cloud Walker. Sad Guys was written by Joe Kort after many years of professional psychotherapeutic practice and personal exploration. Its creation wasn't intended as a challenge to mainstream culture, nor as an attempt to invent a new category. Rather, it was born from a wish to give visibility and language to those within the gay community who hadn't previously been seen, those who finally needed a word to describe themselves. Let me briefly introduce Joe Kort. Joe Kort is a psychotherapist from Detroit, United States of America. He also holds a doctorate in sexology and is recognized as an expert in LGBTQ counseling. He has worked in the fields of gay mental health and sexual education for more than 30 years. Within his practice, he has met visitors of many kinds, some gay men unable to enjoy sexual intimacy because of shame, and others anxious about sexual roles or expectations. Joe himself is aside. In the book, he recalls that during his youth, friends would often tease him and call him a virgin, because he neither penetrated nor was penetrated. Some even questioned him, asking, "Then are you really gay? Does that count as having sex?" Those questioning looks made him feel as though something within him was missing or broken. He once said during a public talk, "I outed myself as a gay man who doesn't engage in anal intercourse, and I joked that boxes have a top and a bottom. Why cannot men like me be size?" This playful remark became a turning point, for he soon discovered that he was far from alone. When he began to mention the term side during lectures, on social media, and in therapeutic conversations, more and more people responded with a look of profound relief, a look that seemed to say, "Finally, someone understands me." What exactly is a side? According to Joe Kort's definition, a side is a sexual preference, not a sexual orientation. In other words, being a side doesn't mean having a different gender attraction. It refers instead to a different mode of a sexual expression. Simply put, sides are people who exclude anal or vaginal penetration from their sexual activity. They still enjoy sex, embracing, kissing, caressing, oral sex, throat touch, and mutual bodily exploration. But they do not require penetration to experience satisfaction. Although such behavior sounds natural, it has long occupied an unacknowledged space within gay culture. On dating applications, for instance, we often encounter only 3 options: top, bottom, and versatile. The world appears divided into 3 roles: the top, the bottom, and the switch. There is no 4th choice. Joe Kort's introduction of the term side gave that 4th side a name. He later thanked dating applications such as Grindr and Scruff for firmly adding side to their identity options. This seemingly minor adjustment represented a cultural acknowledgement. Side people were no longer those who had to explain themselves with a quiet "no anal." They finally possessed both recognition and a word through which they could affirm their own identity. Why do we need this book? Joe Kort wrote this book for a simple reason: to dissolve shame and restore diversity. He stated, "Whether a man enjoys anal sex or not is no reflection on his sexual orientation. Whether or not a man enjoys anal intercourse has nothing whatsoever to do with his sexuality." Yet in reality, many sides are burdened with social labels. You are not truly gay. You are too conservative. Perhaps you simply haven't been opened up yet. Some even begin to doubt their own bodies, wondering whether they are physically defective or psychologically abnormal. This self-doubt, Joe Kort explains, originates in sex education itself. Traditional sex education is structured around reproduction, and from religious ideas it inherits the belief that penetration equals real sex. He wrote, "Penetration being the defining sexual act is nothing more than a religious response to reproduction. The notion that only penetrative intercourse constitutes real sex is therefore a remnant of a religious thought. Over time, it seeped into secular culture, leading many to believe that without penetration, it doesn't count as making love. But Joe Kort poses a counter-question. Oral sex is sex. Why then are acts such as hugging, rubbing, kissing, and exploring one another's bodies not considered sex? He reminds readers that sexual intimacy should never be defined by a single form of behavior. It ought to be understood as a conversation, a mutual exchange of understanding and satisfaction. The structure and content of the book. Zeitgeist is divided into several parts. It begins with Joe Kort's personal experiences, his feelings of isolation and shame as a side within gay culture. He then introduces the psychological and the sexological perspectives, analyzing how shame can become internalized into the belief that I'm not good enough or I'm not normal. The middle portion of the book, it's perhaps its most moving. Joe Kort interviewed numerous side guys, including Darrow, Oblo, Tom, and Terry. Some had been distanced by partners because they dislike anal intercourse. Others were told, then you mustn't truly be gay. Yet some, upon finding partners who accepted them as they were, rediscovered the meaning of intimacy. For instance, Tom said, I don't want to perform. What I want is to explore my partner's body and to let him explore mine. I want to hold, to kiss, to play, to be held. Such words sound tender, honest, and profoundly human. He wasn't lacking in desire. He simply longed for a connection that felt more genuine and delicate. In the book's final chapters, Joe Kort writes from the perspective of a psychotherapist, offering guidance on how to communicate sexual preferences with one's partner, how to move beyond the framework of a top and bottom, and how to rebuild sexual confidence. He emphasizes one sentence above all: whatever you do, do not abandon your erotic life. The strength of this line lies in its reminder that eroticism is not merely the interaction of genitals, but a resonance between body and mind. Sides are not people without sexuality. They are people who experience sexuality in a different way. The meaning of this book. Zeitgeist is not simply a book about gay sexual culture. It is, more profoundly, a text about redefining pleasure. It shows that sex is not limited to penetration or the act of being penetrated, but exists in every gaze, every touch of skin, every moment of being understood. It brings marginalized desires back into the light and invites bystanders to reflect. Have we been too quick to define others through pre-existing language? Have we been too ready to mistake difference for wrongness? Joe Kort tells the most complex emotions through the plainest words. The book's power doesn't lie in theory but in empathy. It gives language and connection to a group of people who had once been lonely. And that, precisely, is why he wrote Zeitgeist. Sometimes, what truly changes us is not a grand theory, but a single sentence that makes one feel understood. The most moving aspect of Zeitgeist lies precisely in such sentences, words spoken by different people, yet all describing the same desire. I wish to be seen, to be loved, to be understood. The writer Zachary Zane, who focuses on sexuality, lifestyle, and culture, wrote in the book, by sharing his own and others' experiences as sides, Dr. Kort reveals the countless ways we can enjoy sex, while simultaneously removing shame from the equation. I love this sentence deeply, for it captures the essence of the entire book, the removal of shame. When we speak of sex, shame often stands like an invisible wall. It prevents us from exploring our desires and keeps us from admitting what is truly real for us. The emergence of the term "sad" is, in truth, a psychological revolution. It doesn't divide the gay community. Rather, it liberates language from monopoly. When we gain new words with which to describe ourselves, it's not merely linguistic freedom. its existential freedom. Joe Kort writes, "Side guys engage in almost every form of sexual activity, except any act that involves anal penetration. They often live under the burden of profound shame, secretly believing that they should be able to perform and to enjoy anal intercourse. Here, shame doesn't originate within the individual, but within social norms. That pressure to desire what one ought to desire is the most invisible yet powerful kind of restraint. When society repeatedly says, without anal sex, it's not truly making love, those who do not share that experience begin to suspect, am I broken?" Through the language of psychology, Joe reminds us that shame is not innate. It's implanted by comparison, definition, and exclusion. The existence of the side gives those suppressed by shame the right to reclaim self-recognition. He also writes, "I've heard gay men say that, unless there is penetration, it's not real sex. Whether or not a man enjoys anal sex has nothing to do with his sexual orientation. Not being a top or a bottom doesn't make a man any less masculine." These three sentences directly challenge the bending of sexuality and identity. Within many gay communities, sexual roles have almost become synonyms for personality. To be a top implies dominance, masculinity, and action. To be a bottom implies softness, submissiveness, and passivity. But Joe asks the fundamental question, why must our desires be imprisoned by roles? The idea of the side breaks open this binary structure. It declares I'm neither top nor bottom. This refusal to belong is, in itself, a form of freedom. And such a freedom is not avoidance, but a choice to listen to one's body with honesty. In his analysis, Joe points out that the over-glorification of penetrative sex stems from a religious culture and reproductive-oriented education. He continues, until the LGBTQ community began to feel anger about such a suppression and began to come out en masse, very few people regarded same-sex relationships as something normal. This statement serves as a reminder. Social transformation has never fallen from the sky. It's forged by those who have come out again and again, who have faced rejection again and again, and through their experiences and courage, have gradually expanded the boundaries of what sex can mean. Joe also declares, oral sex is sex. There is no such a thing as normal sex. These two short sentences sound almost like slogans, yet they carry immense depth. They dismantle the myth of sex equals penetration and challenge the logic that normal equals majority. Within discussions of sexuality, the word normal is perhaps the most dangerous of all. For once someone holds the power to define what is normal, everyone else becomes abnormal. When I reached this page, I paused to reflect. If the purpose of sexual intimacy is not to complete an act, but to feel connection and pleasure, then the word normal becomes redundant. Sex never needed to be standardized. Joe continues, the gay male community has its own preferences, and these preferences often slip into prejudice. Within this culture, the top is glorified, the bottom is feminized, and the side is marginalized. Yet Joe's view is that no one is superior to another. It's not a war nor a hierarchy, but a coexistence of diversities. The existence of the side enables us to reconsider the distance between gender and desire. Desire needn't obey gendered roles. It can be free, fluid, and authentic. The very term to lose one's virginity originates in Puritan culture, and its definition refers only to the first act of penetration. When Joe pointed this out, I couldn't help but smile bitterly. Even the concept of virginity carries the shadow of religion. He says, "Don't let anyone tell you that you are not having sex. You are simply a side guy." This line is profoundly healing. It allows people to reclaim the power of definition. Concepts such as the first time or real sex should never be determined by others. Joe further adds, "The more we speak of and acknowledge the diversity of sexual experiences, the less sex will feel excluded or ashamed." This is one of the gentlest declarations in the entire book. Visibility is always the first step towards change. As more people dare to say "I'm aside," shame begins to lose its hold. The stories of people such as Daryl and Albalo illustrate this reality vividly. Daryl says, "I no longer feel like anyone's ideal partner." Albalo says, "Our options were already few, and our preference makes them even fewer." Their words are honest and painfully real. Yet I wish to say this: scarcity doesn't mean weakness. Precisely because they are few, they cherish one another more deeply and possess a greater ability to redefine intimacy. Saunders says, "Allowing the concept of side to move beyond the gay community is a step towards social progress." Tom says, "I don't wish to perform, I simply wish to explore, to embrace, to kiss, to play, and to be embraced." Alfred says, "He was once told he was wasting his time." Evan refers to the medical term anal dyspareunia, physical pain resulting from anal intercourse. Terry says, "Much of the excitement in sexuality originates within our minds." These words left a lasting impression upon me. And Joe offers a final reminder: the gay community should learn from the kink community, which has never been ashamed to express its preferences openly. These voices act like mirrors, reflecting the full spectrum of human desire. They are not rebelling against the mainstream, they are completing what was missing. Every form of desire has its reason for existence, and every form of pleasure has its shape. Being aside doesn't mean doing nothing, it means doing differently. They don't pursue climax but connection. They don't emphasize positions but emotion. It brings to mind a simple truth: sex is not about possession, but about understanding. This section conveys more than the idea of side. It's about how our entire sexual culture must learn to let go of standards and embrace diversity. Because in matters of sex, there is no protagonist and no one who is wrong. Only genuine desires and many ways in which we seek to be loved. After finishing Side Guys, one sentence lingered in my mind: sex shouldn't be an examination, but an exploration. Joe Kort's book reveals that what we have long called sex education has been confined by the notions of reproduction and role-playing. We are taught how to avoid pregnancy, how to distinguish the top from the bottom, and how to complete the act. Yet few have ever asked, what do you genuinely enjoy? Fewer still have said, it's alright if you are different. Sad Guys quietly whispers to those who are different, you are not wrong. A revolution against shame. Within traditional gay culture, sex is often treated as a form of proof of manliness, proof of authentic gay identity, proof that one knows how to perform. But such proof almost always comes at the cost of shame. Through his own story, Joe Kort demonstrates a simple truth: shame doesn't purify, it isolates. He writes of being called a virgin by friends because he didn't engage in anal intercourse. He felt as though something essential to his gay identity was missing, until he realized that those definitions were never created for people like him. The emergence of Side gave people an alternative narrative of selfhood. It wasn't merely the recognition of a sexual diversity, but a form of a psychological liberation. When you can say, without embarrassment, I don't have anal sex, you reclaim the sovereignty of your own body. That's a power deeper than courage. It's a reconciliation. Redefining sex. A central idea repeated throughout this book is sexual intimacy is not equivalent to penetration. In mainstream culture, we are easily trapped by a formulaic sequence: foreplay, penetration, climax, end. It reads like a stereo lesson from a textbook. Joe Kort reminds us that sex shouldn't possess a structure, but a feeling. It may be an embrace, a touch, an exploration, or the subtle rhythm of shared breathing. Sometimes it may involve no explicit goal at all. This understanding is quietly revolutionary. It transforms sex from a performance into an experience. It releases us from the pressure to complete something and invites us instead to feel. Building sexual confidence. Within the book, Joe Kort also stresses a key psychological insight. Sexual confidence arises not from technique or performance, but from a permission to be oneself. Some people force themselves to engage in acts they don't wish to perform, merely to avoid rejection. Others pretend to enjoy what they don't, simply to escape being labeled not sexual enough. But Joe's message is clear. Genuine intimacy is founded upon honesty. Only when one sincerely expresses one's boundaries and desires can sexual connection become free and even sacred. Diversity as human nature, not the exception. One of the book's greatest contributions is its challenge to the notion of normal. The sentence, "There is no such a thing as normal sex," stands at the very core of the modern reform of sexual education. As long as the concept of normal exists, someone will always be left outside it. Once we stop comparing ourselves to others, we can experience ourselves and each other more freely. In this sense, SAD represents more than a sexual preference, it's a cultural awakening. It teaches that the purpose of a sexuality is not merely physiological release, but emotional connection and mutual understanding. SAD as an invitation to the future. The emergence of SAD is not confined to the gay community. It challenges society's entire system of defining sex. It encourages people to ask, how many forms of pleasure can exist? Can intimacy exist without penetration? There may never be a single answer, yet the very act of asking is itself a form of freedom. When I closed the book, I felt not shock, but calmness, as if someone had quietly said, "It's all right, you may love in this way." In that moment, I understood that this book is not truly about sex at all. It's about understanding the body, understanding desire, understanding one another. And in that moment of understanding, we each become a little more complete. If you were to ask me what kind of book Zeitgeist truly is, I would say that it's both a mirror and a key. It reflects the souls that have been forgotten, and it unlocks a wider understanding of what sex can mean. Joe Kort doesn't rely on complex theory, nor does he preach. He simply places himself honestly within the pages, as a gay man who doesn't engage in penetration, as a psychotherapist, and as someone who has found himself between shame and desire. He has made the world sad less lonely, and he has allowed countless others to say for the very first time, "I am one as well." The insights this book has given me. Zeitgeist compelled me to re-examine a foundational question: for whom does our body truly live? In many cultures, sex has become an extremely regulated examination. From sex education to religion to community norms, we are all told how to act and what to enjoy. Our own desires, however, are often reduced to a set of labels: top, bottom, versatile, active, passive. The word side appears like a crack within that labeled world, a fissure through which light enters. It reveals that intimacy without penetration can still be intimacy, and that connection without performance can still be complete. Joe Kort once wrote a sentence that I hold dear. Sex is what you think sex is, not what someone else says it is. This line feels like the awakening of a soul. My most profound impression. The passage that moved me most was spoken by an interviewee named Craig. The question, "What do you like?" has always filled me with anxiety. Even writing this makes me sad, because I know it comes from a lack of self-love, a belief that I do not deserve the kind of touch I truly long for. That sentence struck me deeply, because such feelings do not belong only to size. They belong to anyone who has ever felt marginalized in love or in sex. Sometimes we think that we lack sexual desire, when in truth, what we lack is a space where we feel safe to be accepted. Sometimes we think we are cold, when in fact, we are simply afraid of being misunderstood once more. Side eyes taught me that sexuality is not a skill but a form of being. When you allow yourself to exist as you are, your sexuality becomes free. Why I would recommend this book? I would recommend Side Guys to every LGBTQ+ person, and also to anyone who has ever felt misunderstood in matters of love or desire. This book does more than explain what a side is. It invites you to ask yourself, what kind of intimacy do I truly desire? It helps us to remove the armor that culture has placed upon us, so that we no longer define our worth by being top or bottom, no longer divide power by penetrating or being penetrated, and no longer measure love by whether or not it ends in orgasm. It restores to sex its tenderness, its breath, and its soul. If you happen to be if, while listening to this episode, you suddenly realize that you might also be sad, please remember this. You are not broken. You are simply different. Difference is not a defect. It's a landscape. Your rhythm of desire, your way of connecting, your mode of intimacy, all deserve respect. In the community, you may still encounter misunderstanding or exclusion, but remember, side is not silent. More and more people are naming themselves with this word, and that in itself is a quiet revolution. And if you are not sad, I invite you to understand them, and to understand the many other forms of a sexual experience that differ from your own. For in understanding others, one comes to understand oneself. Every preference, every boundary reminds us that human desire exists in infinite variations. Joe Kort notes in his book that the gay community could learn from the kink community, which has never hidden its preferences, but expresses them clearly and honestly. Perhaps we could all learn such courage. A few lingering thoughts. Before we close, I would like to leave you with several questions, and perhaps you might share your thoughts in the comments below. What is your definition of sex? Have you ever doubted yourself because you are different from others? If penetration and assigned roles ceased to exist, how would you then understand intimacy? Where do you believe the boundary lies between love and desire? There are no standard answers to these questions, yet perhaps the very act of thinking about them is the beginning of rediscovering yourself. I'm Cloud. Thank you for listening to this episode. Until next time.